Roger, sir.
So, welcome back to the Router Sarn podcast, and I'm your host, Sarn Cruz. And today we have our very first guest. It's Lieutenant Josh Schaffrin. LT, go ahead and tell everyone about yourself. What's your name, rank, and your time in service?
Well, actually, it's captain now. I just got IPSA finally updated, so that's retroactive to May 1st. But yeah, just made Captain Josh Schaffrin. Currently a 67J, a medevac pilot, and currently stationed at Fort Novasil, Alabama.
All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to talk about your earlier years in the Army, right? And the first thing I want to ask you, because obviously you were, well, not obviously, but you were enlisted prior to changing over to the dark side, right?
Right.
What was your MOS and what was the highest rank achieved?
So yeah, I first joined in 2009. I was an MP. Don't judge me for that. Okay, I learned my lesson. But
Try not to.
I was an MP, and the highest rank I achieved was a staff sergeant. Crossed over at the 8-year mark.
And while you were enlisted, what did you do? Like, did you have any deployments? Did you have any schools that you went to? Did you do any type of broadening assignments?
Joined in 2009. I was stationed at Campbell. From 2011 to 2012, I deployed to Afghanistan. I was a specialist at the time. So we were there about a year. We were in Kandahar. Got back, attended certain schools. Like, obviously, I went through like the rigmarole, like WLC at the time, which is now BLC. Combatives level 1 and 2, SRT, Special Reaction Team Training, phase 1 and 2. That's like, think of that as like SWAT for the Army, or I guess but it's mainly just for MPs. Went to drill sergeant school. I was a drill sergeant from 2015 to 2017. That was probably the highlight of my career, even up to this point now. Very rewarding experience. It's like having a kid. You get to watch them grow from civilian to soldier. So that was very, very rewarding. And then a few other schools too. Crewmaster Gunner School, which is about learning how to use a little electromagnetic jammers that are in like certain vehicles, like the CBRJ, the Duke, the Thor, that kind of thing when you're overseas. Hoist training, which is like some type of counter intelligence thing. It was only a week long. I don't remember much about it, but yeah, those are the schools I attended since while I was enlisted, for sure. And I think physical security school, which is about like inspecting arms rooms and stuff like that.
Mm. So it sounds like a lot. So I guess my next question is, do you think all of that helped you with your crossing over to the dark side?
Absolutely. I just think it makes you more well-rounded. I think the biggest thing is like actually going through basic training, going through AIT, and then being a soldier, right? Once you're in that position of power as a platoon leader or even as a platoon sergeant, right? You know what it's like to be that E3, that E4. So like they don't want to unpack the Connex 15 times. I don't want them to have to do it because I had to fucking do it. You know what I mean? So you take that into consideration before asking your platoon to do anything. Some things you can't help, right? Shit rolls downhill. If the company commander says we're going to do it and you try to fight it, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. But you mitigate the stupid shit, I think. You know what I mean? And especially being a former NCO, you know what it's like to be an NCO. And the last thing you want is a lieutenant stepping on your toes. Like my main philosophy was just to empower the NCOs, let them do their thing. And then, if I have to get involved, I will, but I really shouldn't, you know what I mean? Especially if you have a strong platoon sergeant, right? But yeah, it definitely makes you more well-rounded as an officer, and I think overall better. And the soldiers respect you too, because they see your background, they know you used to be like them, they want to emulate you. You know what I mean? So they know you get it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's true because and that's kind of like how we met, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I was an incoming platoon sergeant, and you were the platoon leader, and we met there.
Right.
We obviously we butted heads a little bit because obviously you know what you're doing. I'm coming in and I'm trying to do things and stuff like that. And but ultimately, the biggest point that I'll give you that I always tell everyone is, in times of need, that staff sergeant kicked in a 1,000%. Like there were times that I was like, even as a sergeant first class, like what the hell am I doing? Because I was new to this BCT, and
Sure.
and you had been there for a while, and I'd lean on you a lot, to be honest with you, and that 100% got 1,000% respect for you for that. So I can see how all of this training translated over when you were a platoon leader. So you almost had to do like a job and a quarter. I'm
Well,
not gonna.
like, well, Well, if you don't forget, like I sought you out. Like, so I had another platoon sergeant, right? And he, no disrespect to him, but like I was like doing like a job and a half, if not like three-quarters of his job, because like, he was newer and he didn't really jive with the platoon. So like I found myself doing almost both jobs at times, and that's why I sought you out. I'm like, hey, because it was what's his name, Sergeant First Class Hennon spoke very highly of you. He's like, hey, I got to start First Class. I'm like, oh, you got to start First Class instead of a staff sergeant? Like, let me get him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I was sold right away, and then I saw your ERB, and I was like, yeah, let's get him.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
I remember that. Yeah, Hennon. Shout out to Hennon, man. I need to get him on the show. He's busy. That op tempo. He's a first sergeant now over at
Oh, is
HH
he?
at HHC.
Nice. That's a different animal.
Yeah,
HHC is like the hardest, I think, to be a first sergeant
yeah.
or even a company commander.
He's
Um,
occupied.
Right. But like, the question you just asked me, right? Sometimes it is a double-edged sword because like it kind of helped me being a staff sergeant because like I didn't really fill the role of a platoon sergeant, at least not very long. So I don't know all the ins and outs of it. But some guys that have might step on your toes a little bit more. And I don't really think we butted heads, too often.
No.
And I don't really think you even really leaned on me that much. It's just obviously like, yeah, you're not as familiar with maybe some of the equipment, stuff like that. I totally got it. You know what I mean? But it was a very seamless transition, and you were a breath of fresh air in contrast to the previous guy. Absolutely. And the soldiers gravitated to you too.
Fair enough.
But with you, I didn't have to worry about you violating EO, sharp, or anything crazy like that. Whereas with some people, you do, right? So that was a huge help for sure.
Fair enough. And he's humble, ladies and gentlemen. Very humble. All right, so let's go ahead.
It depends who you ask, but yeah.
Let's go ahead and transition to you as an officer, right? So for the audience, how did you go? How did you transition from enlisted to officer? Like, tell us what that process was like for you.
So what I did was it's called the Green to Gold Hip Pocket Scholarship. Not a lot of people know it, and it's not as desirable as some of the other options, right? You might see a lot of people that are enlisted that go through OCS. That means they already have their degree. They go through OCS, which is like basic training times 10. I think it's like 10 weeks at Benning, I want to say, or now, excuse me, Fort Moore. But they'll do that, and then they'll immediately commission. And the way that'll work is once they go through OCS, if they're first of the class, there's like 3 branches of each, such as infantry, armor, or whatever. They pick one of the infantry. Hey, I want infantry. They go on, right? If you're last in your class, you're getting the last choice, which is probably chemical or MP or whatever, right? No disrespect to the branches, but typically those may not be as sought after, right? In my case, I did the Hip Pocket Scholarship, which the way that works is you get discharged, you go to school, and then whenever you finish school, you come either back on active duty if that's what you want, or you could go National Guard or Reserves. The problem with that is you lose your paycheck because you're technically out of the Army, right?
Mm.
And with the Hip Pocket Scholarship, I could have either had them pay for all my school, or I could use my GI Bill to go to school and get 5,000 a semester for room and board. So that's what I did.
Mm.
So I would get $5,000 every semester from the Hip Pocket Scholarship. I would get about 2,000 from using my GI Bill, which will give you like Sergeant BAH for wherever you go to school. In Southern California, that could probably be $2,000 alone, right? I had a GI Bill kicker from when I joined back in 2009 that paid me $850 on top of that. And then I also had like a cadet stipend of like, I think it was like $350 junior year, $450 senior year. So I made quite a bit of money to go to school, but it wasn't enough for me to live off of as a staff sergeant. So luckily I was married to my ex-wife Ashley at the time. So that allowed me to keep my TRICARE. That allowed me to live off of her. We were able to make ends meet. So it was a decent option. Another option that they have now too is green to gold active duty option. The way that works is provided you can get your degree in 2 years or less, and whether that's your bachelor's degree or even your master's, which they'll pay for, and that's the option my ex-wife chose. You remain on active duty. Your duty station's college. So you'll keep all your benefits. You'll get Sergeant BH for wherever you go to school, and basically everything will stay the same. The only difference is you're at a college. You're not at a post anymore. So that is a highly desired option. In my case, I originally needed 3 years of school. That's why I did the hip pocket option. However, I was able to do summer classes and shorten my time down to 2 years.
Okay.
So, but each commanding general has like maybe 5 or so a year, and the bigger installations might have more. So it's definitely worth looking into. But think about it: can you afford to go without your paycheck if you choose that option, right? But the benefit to that option, that could work for anywhere from 1 to 4 years of school. So I mean, it may not be a bad idea, especially if like you want to go, if you can live with your parents, go to school near your hometown, do it. I highly recommend it.
So you mentioned that you get discharged. So you're saying that your time stops.
Correct. In my case, it does. Now, if you're on active duty option, it doesn't, right?
Okay.
So, and that's usually the more preferred option. But again, that's only for 2 years or less of school, whether that's to finish your master's, finish your bachelor's, or whatever. In my case, I needed 3 because I didn't have enough college credit. And you can CLEP some, you can take some online through CTC. That's a university I highly recommend. They're very Army friendly.
Yes.
Um, but in my case, yeah, I originally needed 3 years, so I had to do the hip pocket option. So I was discharged. My time stopped. But I still made a decent amount, like 25,000 a year to go to school. Most people don't have that, right? And some people might qualify for grants, FAFSA, Pell grants, whatever. But if it wasn't for my ex-wife at the time to live off her income, I wouldn't have been able to maintain that same lifestyle that I had before.
Mm.
So
Yeah, FAFSA is something that troops don't really know, and if they do know, they don't take advantage of it. Like I was a sergeant, and I was still able to get FAFSA. So soldiers don't really use that a lot.
right. And in my case, like I actually qualified for a Pell Grant when I was taking college online as a E5 that was married as a sergeant. But for some reason, as an officer, or I'm sorry, when I was out of the Army trying to use FAFSA, I wasn't. But I think that was based off my tax return as a staff sergeant. And I guess I might have, I don't know, I just didn't qualify.
Yeah,
And I think having kids as well might help some people qualify for certain things. So,
that's true. You not only went from staff sergeant to lieutenant, now captain, but
right.
you also went flight.
Um, and flight was always a dream of mine. Like I tried to go flight back in 2015. I couldn't pass the flight physical at the time. When I first was about to commission in 2019, tried to pass a flight physical again. I couldn't. Certain medication I was on after my deployment was like an automatic disqualifier. So eventually I came off of that. I commissioned as medical services initially because I knew that would be a good transition into being a pilot. Luckily it was. And the first thing you want to do is take and pass the SIFT, which is, I think it was before it was called like the AFAS. Now it's called the SIFT. Um, and that's essentially just seeing if you're mentally capable of becoming a pilot. And it's mainly learning how to take the test. There's a book called Mastering the SIFT. It's orange and blue on Amazon. I literally got that, read it on CQ the night before, took it, got a 50. You just need a 40 or higher. Obviously, you want to do the best you can on it, but whether you get a 41 or you get a 60, you're still qualified to be a pilot. So I don't think the score will hurt you if you really want to do it. And it's mainly learning how to take the test. There's like one section that's like math, and you don't want to just blow through them and answer them all. You want to only answer them if you know you're right, and you want to take your time with them. And as you get them right, they get progressively harder. But if you just try to answer like the 30 questions in the hour you have, you might hurt yourself a little bit. There's another one that says it's like which one doesn't belong. It'll be like 4 different arrows, one of which is like filled in black. That one doesn't belong, and you just click on it. And like that one, you literally have like 180 questions to do in 2 minutes. You're not gonna be able to answer all those, but it's mainly just figuring out how fast you can, adapt. There's another section that has like land over here, water over here, and it's like this is a plane banking left, a plane banking right, this is a plane taking off, a plane taking down. It's just the ability to recognize that. And one of the hardest sections for me was it was I believe it was like distorted images, and there'd be like a bunch of lines, and underneath would be like a shape, but it wouldn't be a normal shape, right? It'd be like a half moon, half cross or something. It wouldn't be like a triangle that was easy to identify. And it was basically about seeing the big picture. So as long as you can learn how to take the test and you don't take it lightly, take and pass that, that's the first step. And you only get 2 chances to do it. You fail it once, the next time you can take it is 6 months later. You fail it again, that's it. No exceptions, no waivers. So take that seriously. Once you pass that, then you can work on the flight physical. Most places won't even entertain a flight physical until you pass that. And the flight physical will encompass your vision, very in depth on that. They'll dilate your pupils. I had to like hold my phone out here to see it for like the next like 2 days after that. So vision's very extensive. Age is I believe the oldest you can be is 32 without a waiver when it comes to flight school. Not saying you can't get one, but the older you get, typically the more health problems. Try to go while you're young. Hearing, obviously, and then like a full-blown physical. And what I tell people is like, if it's not in your medical records, don't mention it, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying to lie about it, but don't, oh, you got stitches one time and they don't know about it. Don't even mention it. Don't put yourself in that situation.
So
But
so
if it's
pretty much
document, sorry, good.
don't complicate it more than it need be.
Exactly, right. Now, if it's don't hide it. Like, I'm not saying to lie, right? But you know how it was when you went through MEPS, treat it the same way, right? So if it's documented in your medical records already, don't hide it. And it's possible you could have been diagnosed with something before. It's no longer an issue. You're good to go, right? I think the hardest waiver, the hardest thing to overcome is like if you've had Adderall before. And that's even for joining the Army, let alone flight, right? Or if you're on a
Yep.
certain medication, like don't hide that. They're going to see that. But if it's, oh, your elbow's bothering you a little bit, but it's never been evaluated, don't mention it. Save that for after you're done, right? But the flight physical is like probably the biggest disqualifier for people. And what they won't tell you is this: once you're on flight, they will do anything they can to keep you, but they will try to keep people out. So try to do that while you're young, while you're in shape, while your vision's good. You can still get LASIK or whatever if you need to, but you're gonna have to do that before. And keep in mind that 32 age limit. And that's just when you start flight school too, not when you finish. And there is a guy here now that's like 39. So there are waivers.
Mm-hmm.
But that is definitely a battle to overcome. Now, what I did, some people might be able to VTIP, think of that as reclassing for officers to straight aviation.
Yep.
Because I was AMED, they wouldn't allow me to do that. They're like, no, we're not going to release you. I'm like, okay. And they're like, but you can go medevac pilot. I'm like, okay. So I submitted for that, filled out the packet. There's some forms you have to fill out. You got to get some letters of recommendation. You want to try to get those from high-ranking people. I'd recommend like a CW5. The way it worked for me, my buddy had applied before. He got in touch with Chief Napoli, and he's a CW5 at Fort Hood. And I basically just emailed him and said, hey, sir, I know you don't know me, but I would love to have a letter of rec from you, et cetera, et cetera. And he was like, hey, you have a lot of time. I love having a lot of time. He's like, I'll meet with you. Send me your ORB. Send me this. Send me that. And he's like, and I'll tweak it, right? And that's exactly what he did. And he gave me advice for the future. Then I also got one from my brigade commander, Colonel Howe at 1st Med Brigade. And I got one from Colonel Zimmerman, who was also knew my buddy Williams when he was at Korea. So that the higher ranking the people you can get, the better. But if you can only get captain, that's not necessarily a big deal. But you want to get at least 3, because that's all the board's going to look at. And then you submit your packet and you just await the results. When it comes to getting a letter of recommendation from anybody, you know yourself. They don't necessarily know you, at least not as well as you do. So pre-write one for them. Touch on a few things. They'll look at it. They'll tweak it. They'll change their signature block if they have to, or their header. But like the less stuff they have to do, the better of a response you're going to get. If you just ask them for a letter of rec, they might sit on it for a while. It may not be, you know what I mean? So like make their job easy. Send them your RB. They can add stuff if they want to. They can take it out, whatever. Once you get all that, then it's just a matter of submitting your packet on time and then awaiting the results. And luckily I got selected.
So once you got selected, so once you studied for the test, took the test, you got your letters, you submitted it, got accepted, what happens now?
So then, like, once you're selected, they let you know that you're selected. Then you have to confirm or deny. I don't know why you would deny it after going through that process, but that is something you have to do. So I had to say, yes, I want to do it, right? Still. But, plans change. Maybe that's why they do that, right? And then from there, it's a matter of coming down in orders. You will PCS to Fort Novasil, commonly called Fort Rucker, or previously known as Fort Rucker. It is in southern Alabama, about an hour and a half from the Florida Panhandle. Not a lot to do in this area, so be prepared to go to Florida or Atlanta a lot. Those are the 2 nearest major cities. But anyway, you'll PCS here. The reason you're PCSing is because it is a very long school. So first you go through SEER school. They used to make SEER school at the end, but a lot of people would go get all their certifications to fly helicopters and be like, I'm not doing SEER school. And then they would just not allow them to be a pilot because that is a requirement. They flipped it. So you got to do SEER school first. So there's no getting out of that. So you go to SEER school. I can't talk much about that. All I will tell you is this: listen, pay attention. You're better off going in there knowing nothing, so you really grasp on everything they're saying. And they're not going to hurt you to the point where you're not going to be able to be a pilot. There's a big difference between the SEER school at Rucker that pilots go to and the CRC they have at, I believe, Benning, or maybe it's at Bragg. I think it's Benning, where the Special Forces guy go to. 2 different things. All right, so go to the one here. It's a little bit easier, I assume.
Okay.
But it's really not bad. You'll lose some weight, whatever. Not bad. It's probably the best school I've been to in the Army thus far. So you go to SEER school first, then you'll start Common Core. That's learning the basics of flight on the Lakota. And that's about 5 months long. You're going to be busy, right? You'll have weekends off. 1 week you'll have flight line in the morning, which you'll be flying at like probably 5 in the morning. And then you'll have academics in the afternoon, anywhere from like 12 p.m. until like 15, 16, sometimes 1700. And that's time consuming because you'll have like daily questions where you got to say like, oh, the max gross weight of the helicopter is this, and you got to memorize that, or like this aerodynamic means this, you know what I mean? So you will have to study about like how to do like full auto rotations and that kind of thing, while also learning about like how weather affects a helicopter, how the different types of airspaces are, that kind of thing. So it can be overwhelming.
So all the intricacies.
Right. And you're learning on a Lakota, which is technically a European aircraft, that they even say straight up this is not an initial entry helicopter to learn on, but that's what the Army does.
Good
right?
Old
Like
Army.
right. But at the same time, it's like you're learning how to do what normally takes a year or more in 4 to 5 months. So that's why it's all crammed together. But I mean, it is just pay attention to your IPs, listen, show up on time and study, but it's all about time management, right? Now, if you're somebody that likes to go to the gym a lot, or you like to play video games, like you might have to sacrifice some time. You might have to save that for the weekends. You're going to be busy. I'm not going to say you're not going to be too busy to have a social life, but if you're married, like let your spouse know now, hey, I'm going to have to be dealing with this. So like the more you can have a supportive team, the easier time's going to be. But that's about 5 months. And then once you're done with that, then you go to advanced airframe. And that's learning how to fly your specific aircraft, whether that's a C-12, the Chinook, the Apache, or the Blackhawk. As a
Mm.
medevac pilot, that's how I'm already locked in the Blackhawk. So, but you're competing for what you want. So the better you do throughout Common Core will dictate what aircraft you get. A lot of
Wow.
people want C-12s. There might only be 4 slots. So if you take it lightly and you don't study hard and you get 70s or 80s across the board, you're probably not going to get C-12s. You'll probably end up with Apaches, which some people want those, some people don't. Typically, they're not as sought after as the Chinook, as the Blackhawk.
Yeah.
But it just depends. Some people want those right off the jump. That's a combat aircraft, so more power to you. I respect it.
I would say,
Um,
yeah.
all right, but it's definitely very rewarding. But just and stay out of trouble. Like a lot of people get in trouble here for like going outside of the pass radius, doing stupid stuff like getting a DUI, same stuff that you might see throughout the Army. So just keep your nose clean, and don't put yourself in those situations.
So
And it is
things.
TRADOC, so they're very restricted as far as like, yeah, as a lieutenant before, I might have been able to sign out telephonically on leave. Now that I'm at TRADOC, I can't do that anymore,
Mm.
right? There's more restrictions. I got to show up at 1300 to be like, hey, I'm not alive. You know what I mean? But there are going to be gaps in between training. And it's during those gaps that you should keep your nose in the books, keep yourself busy, rather than, going out to Florida and partying every weekend. But hey, as long as you stay out of trouble, you do you. So,
You got to make sacrifices. But I
mhm.
didn't know, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people didn't know that you had to compete for which one you want to fly. That's
Right.
interesting.
And like in my case, I'm a 67J, so I'm already locked into Blackhawk. And some people that are like, say, National Guard or reserves, they already probably know their aircraft. So those guys are an exception to the
Mm.
rule. But if you're active duty, yeah, you're competing. So, and it depends, right? Sometimes I might have 5 C-12 slots. Sometimes I might have one. Sometimes I might have 4 or 5 Chinook slots. Honestly, I think the Chinook slots are probably like the most rare at this point because I think they're trying to phase out that aircraft. How they're going to do that, I really don't know.
Mm.
But those are typically the Chinook and the C-12 are the more sought after ones. And what they commonly refer to in like flight school, they're like, oh, well, if you don't do well on this check ride, everybody needs Apache pilots. So like that's typically one that's not as coveted. But some people want it, like I get it. It's a cool aircraft. You get to shoot stuff. Can't really do that in the other ones as easily. So
Yeah, kind of like not. You don't even have the capability.
yeah, exactly. So
So,
I think certain Blackhawks do, if they're outfitted with those, but not as often as say the Apache, of course, which
oh yeah,
that's their primary
that's what
mission,
they
right?
do.
Hmm.
All
And
right.
also keep yourself healthy. In Common Core, there is no PT because you're so busy. So if you're not working out and
Mm.
you for 4 or 5 months, then all of a sudden, then you go to Common Advanced Airframe and you're still not working out, then now you're almost done. Hey, you got to take a PT test before you go to your unit. You know what I mean? Keep
Done.
yourself in shape, right? And don't get hurt because like you break your arm, you're not going to be flying. Then you get a down slip, and then you have to get an up slip before you can go fly again. So keeping yourself healthy is very important and
Yeah,
often overlooked.
I know about up slips. I remember when I was in Alaska, they had 152 aviation. They always needed those up slips. So I know about
Hmm.
those. All
Right.
right. All right, fair
So
enough. So let's go ahead and switch over to your what many may not know is your acting career.
right,
So
and the reason I started that right is like so I was on hold for like 8 months. And I was like, well, I'm not going to sit here and be bored. And like, yeah, I did, keep my skills sharp as far as like studying and committing stuff to memory as far as like the next phase of training. But it's like, I need to do something constructive with my time. So what I basically did was I found a website called Backstage. There's an app for that. Threw up some headshots, threw up some monologues, just me recording them at home, and then go on there. You find available roles, you submit yourself for it, and if they like you, then they give you an audition. They have you do a self tape, or they have you come in for an audition. Since COVID, the acting community has gone to like more self tapes, which is great. You can record with a background like this, look over here, do your lines, whatever, and then submit it. If they like it, they like it. If they don't, they don't. But that's just kind of what I did. And then sure enough, I booked one gig and then I booked another, and then it just kind of evolved from there.
so
Um,
so are you telling us that you stumbled upon acting out of boredom?
Partially out of boredom. Well, okay. So so I was divorced. I initially filed for divorce. I think it was back in July, but it started getting more intense during October and stuff like that. So while that was happening, I needed like I don't want to say an outlet or an anti-drug, but it gave me something to focus on. And I also got involved with the law of attraction, right? And what that encompasses um, is whatever you think about most, good, bad, and indifferent, you attract back to you. And the problem is people think about what they don't want. and they just attract more negative experiences to them. And it's actually biblical too. Proverbs 23:7 says that man becomes what he thinks about, right? So whether, I know I sound like every guidance counselor in the world, but whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. All right. So think about what you do want and go attack that. Like if you think, oh, I'll never be able to do this, you won't. So why think like that?
Mm,
Or like, let's say you wake up late for work, you stub your toe out of bed, you spill your coffee on the way to work, you're running late, so you get a ticket for speeding. Your whole day just turns into crap. That's because you're constantly in a negative vibration. You're
yeah.
thinking about what you don't want. Think about what you do want. Good things will start to happen. There's no like, I can't quantify this for certain, but just kind of watch what happens. And nobody wants to be pissed off all day long.
No.
But basically, what I decided, it's always something that I wanted to do, but I never really had the time. And being on hold for so long, I had the time. And I was single, so I started devoting more time to it. And yeah, it just kind of took off, right? But the best advice I have for people is like, don't limit yourself. If you want to do something, go do it. The only person that can stop you is you.
Is
Yeah,
you. All right.
right.
All right. So I guess my next question would be, what piece of advice would you give soldiers that are trying to do what you did, as in going into an acting career?
Well, I would say just keep in mind you're still part of the Army, right? So you're gonna have to balance both, and that's not gonna be easy. Don't do anything that's gonna hurt your career. Like you can't wear your uniform, you know what I mean? You can't do anything indecent, that kind of thing. That's first and foremost, right? And certain opportunities might require the PAO to bless off on it. All right, so just keep all those in mind. That being said, um, there's certain hotspots in certain areas. Like really, unless you're in Fort Drum, New York, or Fort Moore near Atlanta, you're probably not too close to any. But a lot of usually the big spots now are like Miami, Vegas, Atlanta, LA, New York City. Atlanta is probably like the new Hollywood because they're not restricted by unions like LA is restricted by SAG after that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But the best thing is just I recommend Backstage. That's one. Actors Access is another. On Casting Networks is another. Find those. Get some professional photos done so they know what you look like. Record if you have prior acting experience, throw those reels up there. If you don't, you record yourself doing a monologue. Something from your favorite movie. I believe I did one from like Matthew McConaughey and The Gentleman, and I did the one. I can't remember. It was Matthew Lillard in some movie. I can't remember what I did exactly, but did that just so they can see your ability. And then usually for an audition they'll give you sides to read, which are just your lines, and read those. It's better if you have a reader, somebody to read the other lines, because acting isn't just you, it's reacting, right? So just because you don't have a line, you could be like your verbal reaction to what somebody else is saying to you, that kind of thing. But yeah, just get on there, apply for everything. And, let's say you apply for 100 things, and of those 100 things, you get 10 callbacks. That's a start. You might only land 3 of those, but you only need 1. And then one leads to another, network with people, get everybody's Instagram, whether they're an actor, director, sound guy, gaffer, who does the lighting, whatever. Network with everybody, because then that just kind of keeps your options open. And oftentimes I've found more gigs through meeting people rather than just on the actual website itself. And then just build your resume. And eventually, like, you might sign with an agent. I got an agent out of Nashville, Terrence Hurd. So he got me like a Sam Hunt music video that was kind of cool. He got me a kayaking opportunity and some country music television thing, but it paid me like $400 to do that, right? Just keep in mind in the beginning, you might have to do free stuff. You might have to do student films. That's okay. Like, there's 3 criteria that I look for whether I'm going to do something. Does it pay me? Do I want to do it? Is it going to be good for my career? If I can't answer at least one of those, then I probably don't do it. In the beginning, though, you might have to make certain sacrifices. And I'm not saying you got to do anything indecent to get there, but you might have to do some unpaid stuff. That's okay. But when you do that, make sure you get the real footage. And then if you get to the point where you can have a reel, which is like 2 minutes long, of like 10 seconds from this acting clip, 20 seconds from this music video, whatever, and you piece them together, that showcases your ability to prospective casting directors. So, and obviously the bigger the production, the higher the standard's going to be for, your self-tape and that kind of thing.
Oh, fair enough. So that's something I didn't even think about, and is the Army, meaning you have to have some things cleared, like the uniform. I understood, because we know that you
Right.
can't be doing things in uniform. It's preferably out of uniform, but clearing things through PAO, that's interesting, and that's good to know, because that wouldn't even cross my head.
Right. And it's not to say that it would necessarily be an issue, right? But if you're wearing the uniform, absolutely. And
Of
like
course.
what I've found is that even people, like, even if you're in the Army, if you're wearing your uniform, it's still considered impersonating somebody in the Army, which is weird. But anybody else, like Dear John, you know why you see the uniforms all messed up? There always has to be something wrong. But that could easily just be like, one award out of order, something's wrong. They're good. And the bigger, the more serious productions will do that. Whereas Dear John, you might see the rank upside down,
Yeah, I've
right?
seen
And
that.
but you notice that because like that's all they showed. So if that's all they show, something in what they're showing has to be messed up. And that's why everybody's like, that's wrong. That beret's messed up. That's not how they, but they do that for a reason. They know what they're doing. They have
Yep.
military advisors,
Of
right?
course they do.
And another benefit that guys could do too, you can do something behind the scenes. Like if you got arms rooms or armor experience, like they need armors. Remember the Alec Baldwin shooting? Ever since that there's a need for armors. Those guys are making $500 a day on
Mm.
set, but you also gotta, accept the responsibility, be like, here's how you fire this. It's clear, whatever. And if something happens, it's gonna fall on you. But ideally, like if that whole thing was a complete debacle, but how that even happens, I have no idea. But if you're using fake weapons with fake rounds, then there should be no risk. Should be in the keyword. So.
Correct. Yeah. Speaking about the networking part, I have a video or a podcast as well that talks about the five pros and cons, and networking is one that I harp on because a lot of
Mhm.
times you think that a lot of us are introverts and we like to kind of like stay away from each other or whatever it is. It's the new thing, I guess. But
Sure.
not putting yourself out there is not gonna. There's no reward, right? It's kind of like fishing. The more you cast out, the more you'll freaking catch a fish.
Exactly. And maybe you might only be helping other people out. That's okay. Like one thing that Denzel Washington said in one of his speeches is, it'll make sense as to why I mentioned that here in a second. He says, true desire in the heart for anything good is evidence from God sent beforehand that it is yours already. And it's just a matter of time. But when you get to where you're going, reach down, pull somebody else up. You know what I mean? Like really good leaders make future leaders. They don't just keep all the power to themselves. And that's what you need to do, pull somebody up. And if you're not mentoring that next group, whether that's a soldier trying to get sergeant, whether that's a lieutenant trying to make captain, whether that's an actor trying to get his first big gig, if you're not pulling them up, then what are you doing? You know what I mean?
Mm.
So
Spoken like a true NCO at heart.
it never goes away.
I know it doesn't.
I got
What's
I
your
got the I got the hat right here.
there? What's it? So when you choose a role, like what makes you want that role?
Honestly, so I apply to almost everything. And it's not a matter of like what your actual demographics are or what your age is. It's a matter of what you can pull off. I think I can pull off anything from 20 to 40. Some people might disagree. If I'm looking really tan, maybe I could pull off being Latino. Maybe I can pull off Italian. You know what I mean? Probably can't pull off, African American, but it's not a matter of what you are. It's a matter of what you can appear as, right? But also I say that I don't find roles find me. And I do find roles that are typically like law enforcement, a white collar, like a lawyer, a business guy, psycho ex-husband. I've gotten that for some reason. Crazy veteran, serial killer. I've gotten that. Or I've gotten FBI agent. I've gotten that a few times. So, but typically it's like I resonate with the role in some way, and that's why I'm casting for it. There's one that I'm filming this weekend called The Reacher, and it's similar to. There's a 2008 film called The Jumper with Hayden Christensen, which is about like paladins, which are people that are hunting these teleporters, and I'm like the lead villain in that. And I'm looking forward to that. And then I'm playing a detective the following weekend in another role. Yeah, it's just kind of interesting. But typically, the more like having a military background is great. You can get a lot of military roles. Having a law enforcement background, great. You can get a lot of law enforcement roles. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have that in order to get them, but it helps because you've been there before.
More natural.
Right. And one common misconception is people think you have to have all these acting classes. You don't. You know what I mean? Like Tom Cruise, great actor. He hasn't had any acting classes. He admits that. What he does is he draws off from personal experiences. I know what it's like to be really angry. I know what it's like to get in an argument with my spouse. So I can channel that energy into something. I know what it's like to lose a father. You know what I mean? So I can pull from that if I need to. So don't think that you have to have acting classes to be successful. Don't think that you have to have movie star looks to be successful. You don't. That might help lead to more roles, but there's a lot of movie stars that don't look like movie stars. Why? Because they're talented. That's what you need. You need the right mindset, and you need to put yourself out there. Don't live your life based in fear disguised as practicality. What we really want seems impossible for us to imagine, so we don't dare to try for it. Try for it. Who knows? Shoot for the moon. If you miss, you might land among the stars. You know what I'm saying?
So don't be a waffle. Don't kind of like box yourself in somewhere. Just make sure you're like a pancake that you can go all the way around. You're
Absolutely.
everywhere. Diverse.
Right.
All right.
Don't limit yourself. Let them tell you no. Don't tell yourself no.
Correct.
And
Okay.
if they tell you no, okay. And don't take it personally. Like there was one role. So I went to Atlanta and I nailed the audition. I didn't get it. They're like, and don't be afraid to ask. Be like, okay, can I ask, why I didn't? Don't get in an argument with them. Just like, just to maybe I did something wrong. It can
Feedback.
benefit me in the future. Exactly. And they go, turn around. And I turn around. They're like, you see that line right there? I'm like, yeah. They're like, anybody shorter than that line couldn't do that role. And I'm like, oh, okay. They're like, but you were great. We'd like you to do this role. Okay, cool. You know what I mean? Had I never asked, maybe that wouldn't have happened. But like, it could easily just be something like that. It could be maybe there's somebody else that had better dynamics with the co-star. I've gotten roles
Yeah.
because I look like I could be married to this person. So that could help too. But don't be afraid to ask those hard questions. Just be prepared to deal with the responses. And at the very least, you can learn something. There's a blessing in everything. So,
Fair enough. So they do have some predeterminers sometimes. Safe to
of
say.
course,
Okay,
absolutely,
that makes sense.
absolutely, yeah.
All right, fair enough. So let's switch gears for a second. Let me ask you this: what do you think people misunderstand about you, if there anything?
Uh, I think a lot of people think like I'm cocky when they first meet me, and I try not to be, right. Like I try to be humble, like you just mentioned. Or they think that I know everything and I don't, or they think that I step on my NCO's toes. Some officers do that are prior service because they think they know everything. Now, if I have to, I will. But typically, if I'm dealing with a solid NCO, such as yourself or Sergeant Giffen, Sergeant Bunn, Sergeant Vargas, I don't have to, right? And I don't want to. That's the main reason I commissioned was, I'll be honest, money did have a part of it. I'd be lying if I
Of
said it
course.
didn't. But at the same time, I don't want to yell at the soldier for their boots being unbloused. I don't want to deal with that stuff anymore. I will if I have to, but like I'd rather like see the soldier, rather if I see a soldier that needs a correction, I'm not going to step on an NCO's toes if there's one available. I'll be like, hey, Sergeant, see that over there? What's wrong with that? Oh, this, sir. Okay, go take care of it. You know what I mean? Too easy. Now, if I'm doing that in front of the NCO, that takes away his power base. I don't want to do that. That's not what we're here for. I mainly want to empower my NCOs and get the hell out of their way because that's the leader I would want to have. And I feel like that's what a good leader does. Be that sergeant first class that you would want to have when you were an E3. You know what I mean? It's too easy. So, and somewhere along the lines, people lose sight of that. In my case, right, I have a huge benefit to being a captain because I got 12 years in. So I can retire. I made captain. I'm good. I can retire.
Fair enough.
So I'm not going to drag my platoon through the ground to get a good OER, to get a promotion. I'm not going to do that. Some people might. But once you get to that point where I'm not going to say I don't care about promotion or that I don't want them, but I'm not going to sacrifice my platoon's health and welfare to get promoted. But what I've also found is if you take care of your platoon, you'll still get promoted. They'll take care of you. You know what I mean? Oh, we're missing this pull socks. Hey, sir, I found one. Where'd you get that? Don't worry about it. Okay.
Spoken
Thanks.
word.
Tactically acquired.
Yeah.
But I mean, but they will take care of you, and like, obviously, like, don't be afraid to, you can buy lunch for the platoon. Who cares if you spend $100 at McDonald's when you're in the field? Big deal. It means that's worth far more to them than it is to you. So do those things. There's no reason not to.
Fair enough. So I will say this, especially on the last part. That is true. You've actually bought lunch for me as well. Like you and buying lunch, they're hand in hand. I don't know where you get the money from, but it happens.
I did sell my truck. I did sell my truck, and I sold it for about 16,000. So that is where a lot of the money came from because I was going to use it to pay it off.
No. You just got the truck, and we were still going over there in that said truck.
I think a lot of that happened was because I wanted to eat out too, and that was a loophole. Because I was I did the bodybuilding competition thing for a while, and that is. If people that do that, more power to you. But like, I like food too much.
Yeah,
I've done it. Competition.
I've done it.
I believe you. Yeah. But once I was like, I'm done with this. I want to eat food, so I'm like, all right, let's go. But at the very least, it's team building, right? But make sure you spread the wealth. If you're right, like, don't only if you're constantly doing it with the same NCO over and over, it's going to look like favoritism. Be unbiased. You know what I mean?
So, oh no, you take 4 or 5 of us with you.
Yeah,
but.
Yeah. Well, Bun was a common one. Bun probably went the
most. Bun was like your stepchild. But going back to the beginning of what you were talking about, yes, I think the confidence that you have, the confidence you exude, could be construed as that. But once you get to know you, you can see like it's so genuine. Like you will help, you will do whatever needs to happen. You're not stepping on no one toes. You genuinely want to help, and an insecure individual might take that way. And I'm here to tell you, I've worked with with Captain Schaffrin, and 100%, this dude is like, I can't say that I'm at a loss for words because you're such a cool dude, but definitely not cocky, definitely knowledgeable. I think it's the jawline and the muscles. I don't know what it is. That's probably what it is that people get intimidated.
This didn't even happen until like 2021, right? Like this didn't even happen until 2020. Oh, and growing my I used to have very short hair. Growing my hair out was a huge confidence boost.
Yeah.
It's starting to recede now, but that's why I call it forward.
That's okay.
One thing that you impressed upon me though was like you said to like I made myself available to everybody, which is a good and it can be a bad at times too, like a double-edged sword. Because like and also too, like I believe you wanted to move your desk in front of the door so people would come to you before coming to me, and that was probably a good idea. But I was too lazy to move the desk.
I know.
But that is a good idea because like then they're always bugging me, and I'm like, not that I have a problem with that. Like the main thing that I wanted as a leader was like if somebody needs my signature, if they need a commander's signature, bring it to me. I don't want them waiting on it, especially if it's important, like TA or whatever. But making myself available to every E1, E2, E3 that has a medical issue, it's like I don't need to do that. You know what I mean? One good piece of advice that I got from I believe it was the platoon sergeant before you. This is the best piece of advice he gave me, and was not to have access to MWDE, which is right access to MedPros, because then that becomes your full-time job. And like, yeah, you know, I could take care of it and not have to bug you or bug Sergeant Giffen or bug somebody else to have to input that shot real quick, but that pulls you away from other duties. So like,
correct.
I know a lot of lieutenants that have it. I do recommend they don't have it though. I think that is some good advice that he gave me.
All right, fair enough, and it was good advice. So speaking about your career, what is the most important lesson you learned throughout the years?
Don't forget where you came from, right? And some people do, right? And I think that's where being humble comes into play, is because I remember what it's like to be an E3, and I will treat that E3 with the same respect I give the company commander, the battalion commander.
Facts.
Granted, I'm not going to call the E3 sir. I mean, maybe once or twice in like passing, just talking to them like an adult. But like, don't forget where you came from. You know what it's like to be that E3. Well, you know, people that have been there before, obviously, and just like you know what it's like to be a E3, E2, E1, depending on where you started, right? And you treat everybody with dignity and respect, and you're going to do the same for your subordinates, your peers, your superiors alike. So like that's what people need to do, and that's where some people lose sight of that over the years, right?
True.
And obviously, like if they mess up, you might get a little heated, or I might get a little heated and talk to them. I'm not going to disrespect them, but I might say more colorful words than I would typically say to the battalion commander. That's one thing, right? But there's a big difference between doing that and disrespecting them. You know what I mean? And I feel like some leaders kind of miss the mark on that because they forget where they came from.
Yeah.
So
I think that holds a lot of weight. What you're saying, we definitely come to a point that you're wondering. I get it. You're at a higher level, but you do have to remember that you're just not gonna just do a blanket statement and everyone has to adhere to it or whatever it is. So yeah, remembering where you came from, I think is huge. I agree with you on that.
right.
Off the wall. If you had to eat one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be?
It would definitely be chicken. I just don't know if it would be fried chicken or chicken wings. And granted, they're kind of the same, but the thing that I found myself eating most over the years is either fried chicken from Publix. Why Publix? I don't know. There's one near me now. Or chicken wings, like hot wings. Like yeah, those would probably be my go-to.
Okay. Is
For
it
sure.
is it for dietary purposes or taste?
No, it's just. I mean, chicken isn't bad for you. It's one of like it is commonly used for bodybuilding, but it's typically like white chicken breast, not like the dark meat, which is what I gravitate to, like the thighs, the wings, the drums, right? But no, I just like the taste of it. So it is what it is.
All right, fair enough. So so speaking about chicken and fitness, we're gonna move into you as a leader real fast. So you're kind of a gym enthusiast, right? So how do you think leaders can make PRT more, I guess, more palatable for their troops?
I would just say like doing stuff outside the box. Like they don't want to do the prep drill. I mean, you kind of have to do like the prep drill and recovery drill within reason, right? But you don't have to do like conditioning drill 1, conditioning drill 2. You don't have to do 2 minutes of push-ups, 2 minutes of sit-ups, or 6120s, right? You could do those within reason. But like one of the funnest PT sessions I did was with Captain Jordan, our former company commander at HHC. And that was like, that involved swimming. That involved like, you know, we would like run around the building and then take like these mallets and like hit this tire and act like we're like, you know, destroying this one village or whatever. Not anything illegal, but like, or like, oh, we got a bounty now. Let's carry these kettlebells and run around, or these water cans, whatever. Carry this wounded soldier on a litter, and it just made PT more fun, you know. And granted, depending on how many people you have and your equipment skill set, that might like limit you a little bit. But yeah, just do stuff outside the box. You know, incorporate sports when you can. That's always a risk. Do your draw right. Make sure they're not rolling their ankle. Basketball is actually, I think, the sport where people get hurt the most,
Hmm.
believe it or not. It's usually not football, it's usually basketball. But I mean, do those when you can, and the soldiers will just gravitate to that. That's what they want to do. They don't want to do, the same push-up, sit-up drill every day. So just mix it up, make it more fun, use weights when you can. But also consider, like, don't break them off, don't get them injured, that kind of thing. So
Mm. So yeah, actually, speaking of that, what you talking about that Captain Jordan did, that kind of like making a scenario out of it. So it kind of
right.
puts you into the mentality of you're not just doing this boring, monotonous PT of bend and reach and go for a run or whatever it is. And
Right. And like in being medics, right? Like, we can do the same with a litter. Somebody's on the litter, they carry it, they run for a little bit. Somebody else hops on the litter, somebody else hops off, you just keep doing it that way. And you can do that on a ruck even, like whatever, just something to mix it up. Pull a Humvee, carry the water cans,
yep.
whatever. The main thing you just got to consider is like just injury, I think. But I think soldiers would get more out of that and they would have more fun doing it than just doing the rigmarole push up, sit up drill like I did as a drill sergeant. Like that was very monotonous.
Yeah.
Got old fast.
Good old fashioned 2 mile, 3 mile run when you have nothing else to do.
Yeah.
That's
I would
that's
rather
that's
I would
old
rather
school.
have it
That,
is. I would rather have that though than the 6, 7, 8 mile runs like
yeah.
that we did back, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
like I'll take that over any day. But yeah, it gets boring.
Fair
Sure.
enough.
Or like, and you can, mix up, run a mile, at that mile, have a different event going on, card PT, whatever. Run another mile, have something else, like just keep leapfrogging that way.
Okay. Speaking of PT, the Army, the ADAA, the NDAA, they put out a suggestion for us to go back to the APFT.
Of course they did.
Now, obviously, they have to pilot it, so it's proposed for 2024. So you will have to pilot for a couple years. So it won't be for a while. But what are your thoughts on the Army potentially either moving backwards or whatever it is on the
I
APFT?
I get why, because like the one benefit to the APFT is like you don't need any equipment to do it. Now, if you want to do like an ACFT, you got to have a lot of graders, you got to have a lot of equipment. Not everybody has all those. However, I feel like they were in the right place with ACFT when they had it be gender neutral, when they had the same standards across the board, because combat doesn't differentiate by gender, so why should we? Um, and I like having a lot of time for my 2 mile run. I'm not a runner. I do not like running. I want 20 minutes to do the run, so that way I can bodybuild and gain weight. And, but if I got to run 13 minutes to get 100, then, which I guess you have to do with ACFT anyway. But
Yeah, but it's
if I
more
got to run, right, if I
leeway.
got to run 15 minutes just to pass, then, I gotta run more. Whereas with the ACFT, I could get by without running as much and still pass with flying colors. I would much rather see the Army stay with the ACFT. I like the idea of it. I like doing I don't understand why they replaced the leg tuck with the plank.
So
I think
annoying.
that's harder. Yeah, have both options. But if they want to do one leg tuck, let them do one leg tuck. I can do one leg tuck way easier than I can do a 2 minute plank. And I feel like, and I know for some reason there was not all women, but some women, some female soldiers were having issues with the leg tuck. But let them do the plank. Who cares, right?
And
Um,
I'm sorry to
sorry,
cut you. It only
you're good.
makes sense to have both because as we're doing this now they're trying to do the bigender because of the way women and men are different. Then why not have the leg tuck for technically for the males because we're
Sure,
gonna and the plank for the females or
right,
that male that has something that's going on some lower injury or something that
sure.
they can just plank.
Right. And I get that with like the standard of the ACFT and the APFT for that matter, because like men typically, on average, right, might have stronger upper bodies, whereas women might be more lower body dominant. Like, sure, that's fine. Maybe even keep the ACFT with the female and male standards. Obviously, on average, most women may not be able to deadlift it as much as most males. Some women can beat some males. It is what it is. You know what I mean? But if they want to deadlift 410, let them deadlift 410. If they want to deadlift 340, let them deadlift 340. You know what I mean? But I can understand like having somewhat of a different standard, like that's okay. But I would much rather see the ACFT stay than the APFT any day.
Okay, I
So
concur. I concur.
yeah,
I think the only issue that they're having is this gender non-gender thing. They need to figure that out. But ACFT
yeah,
is funner, and it's especially when you're doing the sprint drag carry when your legs go to jello. But the whole
yeah.
competing against three other individuals that are on side of you, that I think that's awesome. I like having
What's
fun.
what's funny is like there was I believe she's a first sergeant now, Janina Simmons. I went to drill sergeant school with her, and she's one of the few females that went to Ranger school. And granted, she did it back before like a lot of I know a lot more women have accomplished that feat now, but she did it
Hmm.
several years ago. She maxed everything on the deadlift or everything on the ACFT except for the ball throw for some reason, and she barely missed it. But it was like it's like man, just the ball throw. You know what I mean? Like it, you'd think it'd be maybe the run, maybe the plank, maybe the deadlift, whatever. But yeah, it was just the ball throw that gave her an issue. But I mean, 597, that's still phenomenal, right? Like I'm not taking anything away from her. But it's interesting to see like what aspects people are strong in and that kind of thing. So
Yeah, that's about, yeah, the ball throw. So speaking of like with with the ACFT, obviously I found out with military.com and armytimes.com, but another place that they're talking about it is on TikTok a lot.
mhm.
So what are your thoughts on this new age TikTok and soldiers?
I think it can be a double-edged sword, right? Like so I had a platoon sergeant, Sergeant First Class Klein. He's out of the army now. He would add his soldiers on Facebook, and people had different opinions on that back in 2014. And he was like, the reason I do it is this. He's like, let's say they come up missing. I have a recent selfie of them. I know their last location. I can find them. You know what I mean? In that regard, it makes sense. You know, granted, some people might abuse that privilege, whatever. They might use it at, oh, what are you doing drinking at 2 in the morning? However, you know, if soldiers are going to post about that, they shouldn't be doing it. Then, hey, correct them all day, Sarge. Like that's your prerogative, right? I'd much rather you do that than have them drink underage and then get a DUI,
Mm.
or whatever, right? Um, but it can be beneficial if leaders use it in the right way, right? There was a video, and I'm guilty of it too. So there was a video a couple years ago where a lieutenant, prior service lieutenant, made a video saying he didn't think being a drill sergeant is hard. I responded to it,
I remember.
and I didn't put it on TikTok though. I didn't have TikTok at the time, but I put it on Facebook and I got like 100,000 views. And there was a lieutenant colonel that emailed me and he was like, "Hey, he's like, some people could take that the wrong way, especially considering he's like, you're a Caucasian male. You made a response to an African American male. He's like, I know you didn't say anything racial involved, but he's like, some people could take it the wrong way." And I understood where he was coming from. And even the guy that made the video initially messaged me, and we had respectful banter back and forth, but he was okay with it. However, there was a point in time where I later on, I think it was earlier this year, where I uploaded that same video with clips of his to TikTok, and he was like, "Remove it," and I was like, "Okay, fine, you know, whatever. It is what it is." But one, be careful what you say on there because, like, you're especially if you're in uniform, because people are gonna nitpick your uniform, nitpick your hair, call you out on anything they can call you out on. But also, if you're saying anything that is like potentially controversial, be prepared to deal with the backlash. And I know other people too, like Austin Muse, or Aston Muse, excuse me, and like Yusha Thomas and other people that may be still in the army, may not be. They could post certain things and get a lot of followers and stuff like that, but the senior leaders could see that and not be happy with it, and they might try to censor certain things. And once you're out of the army, you can be on U.S. Army what the fuck moments, and nobody's going to do anything. But
Correct.
if you're still in, be cognizant of that and be careful what you post. Don't do anything that's going to get you in trouble, right? And I know certain leaders might see certain WhatsApp messages that they might have sent that are on, and they know they sent it, but they blur out the name. They're like, "What the fuck? What is that doing going on there?" But at the same time, if you end up on there, you probably did something wrong in the first place.
100%.
So like, I see it as a way to keep people in line. But yeah, don't put yourself in that position. So
Yeah, I see a lot of there's a sergeant major, she does she's a sergeant major for legal, and she does a
mhm,
lot of knowledge. She spreads a lot of knowledge, and at the same time she does a lot of stitching, but she'll
right,
block their face and stuff, so you can't see the soldier, you can't see the
right,
name, but you can see the action, and she
hmm,
addresses the action, and she'll either say, "Hey, you should probably take this down," or whatever it is. But
right,
I enjoy the fact that senior leaders are getting on there for the checks and balances, and they're also spreading knowledge.
right.
So that's a good part.
Right. And it can be beneficial. I remember there was some controversy a couple years ago because there was some, I believe it was a captain that like called out somebody and then she got an AAM or RCOM for it. I don't remember what the specifics were. That was on Facebook.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like if you're in the wrong and they correct you, then you know you're in the wrong. It is what it is. But just be prepared for the scrutiny if you post anything in uniform, and hopefully don't do it when you're saying something controversial or incorrect or whatever the case may be.
All right. Fair enough. I 100% agree. Final question. This is
Yes.
final question. So, if you could change anything about the army, one, two, three things, four things, just let me know. What would it or they be?
Okay, the first thing I would change is GOMARs. All right, so what people don't know, the GOMAR is a general officer letter of reprimand, and they call it administrative. It's not technically punitive. It's not a punishment, right? But depending on where you're at in your career, you could potentially get a GOMAR that is permanently filed in your IPERMs. It might as well be punitive, but it's a loophole because they call it administrative, and then you're not going to get promoted or whatever else. Now, if it's locally filed, it's like a counseling statement, or if it's thrown out, it's thrown out. But I feel like that's a loophole that senior leaders can exploit in order to basically punish a soldier and make it punitive without calling it punitive. I would just get away with those in general. Um, because I feel like if they mess up bad enough, give them an Article 15. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Get rid of the GOMAR, or maybe if you're going to give them a letter of reprimand, have it be from the battalion commander, to where it's like it's on file, it's written, but it couldn't possibly be put in their IPERMs to the point it's going to hurt them. You know what I mean? So
For
like,
the rest of their career.
right. So, and that's the downside. Now, to be fair, right? If you get a permanently filed GOMAR, you can petition to have it removed after a year, and then everything's fine. But what if it's not removed, right? And then what if you don't make anything higher than lieutenant or staff sergeant? You know, are you still able to retire at least as a staff sergeant? Yeah, you can retire at 20 years, but you probably want to be sergeant first class or higher. So I would rather just, if I was a staff sergeant looking at sergeant first class, I would rather just get an Article 15, deal with that for a few years, and then go on to make sergeant first class later on than have a permanently filed, GOMAR
Yep.
preventing me from going anywhere.
Been there, done that one.
Yeah, yeah. So I would just get rid of those. Now, another thing I would change is like OERs and OERs, right? And I do like how before everybody was a 1-1. You know what I mean? Everybody was a 1-1, and there's okay, this guy's a 1-1, this guy's a 1-1. We can't promote everybody. Now they restricted a little more to where like now it's more fair, and I like that. And you could not be, you could not get a MQ right now because your senior leader or your raider already gave that out, so he has to give you an HQ, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's okay, as long as it's written strongly. So I like how they fix that issue. What I would include on there within reason is have a section for your peers and your subordinates to evaluate you, not just one, because somebody could have their chip on their shoulder. So have it be like a general, like kind of like a platoon command climate survey to where everybody reviews you, because I believe your subordinates see a lot more than your senior leaders do. And your peers might as well, right? And your peers might stab you in the back too. And that's the problem with the officer community, is like a lot of people are cutthroat. You know what I mean? Because I want the top lock so I can get promoted, blah 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 blah. You shouldn't be that way. And I feel like a lot of that stems from ROTC or West Point and how competitive people are in college for their branch of choice. But I would have a section there, at least for the subordinates, to where they can give their unbiased opinion of that leader, but have it be a pool of people, not just one or two. So that way, if somebody has a chip on their shoulder, they're not, ruining that potential platoon sergeant's career. So I would include that if they can in a way that makes sense.
I think that I like both of those. The Gomar thing, because like I said, that carries. If I mess up when I'm an E5 sergeant and I
Mm-hmm.
get a Gomar, and typically the average and junior soldier is making sergeant in 2.5 years. So you're telling me for
Right.
18 years I have that on my record. Just like you said, yes, you can get it removed and stuff, but now you're at the mercy of.
When it comes to GOMARs, like they say there's like a standard of proof, like 51% are based on the preponderance of evidence. But in all honesty, like if a general wanted to, they could write a GOMAR and they could sign it and they could give it to you. And there's not much you can do about it,
Yeah,
regardless of what the evidence says. You know what
correct.
I mean? Like if they firmly believe, whether that evidence is, that evidence could be inaccurate. It could be fabricated. They might know that they might just, their legal team gives it to them. They say, sign this, sir. They're like, okay. You know what I mean? So I would assume that most generals wouldn't do just that, but at the very least, like maybe somebody lied and they believe that story to be true, and then you get one.
Hmm.
With a court martial or with an Article 15, that's going to be more highly scrutinized. So that's why I say go for that. You know what I mean? If somebody tries to give you an Article 15, refuse. Take it to court martial if you're in the right, and then you're going to beat that no problem. If they violated your Article 31 rights to remain silent,
Yeah,
take it to court martial. You'll win. But with a GOMAR, you may not have that option.
it's
So
stuck.
you'll have the
That's it.
option to do a rebuttal,
Yeah,
but
but
that's up to them to read it and believe it.
yeah,
So
now you're at the mercy of. So I like that, and I also like the peer review type thing on the NCO OER.
mhm.
It'll force a lot of these just people in the army,
Right,
right, to not brush off your peers or not
right,
brush off your subordinates and make you be a better person. Because a lot of these
right.
times, all these guys are doing is, you're not my raider, so I don't care about you. I only care about
Exactly.
impressing my raider and my
Right.
senior raider, of course. So
And some people put more weight on the senior rater than they do the rater at all.
100%.
Because like the rater does performance,
Yep.
the senior rater does potential.
Correct.
Potential is a little bit more valuable.
Yep.
So like I would rather, how they say like what seniors, peers, and subordinates alike in the NCO creed, like
Correct.
make the rating that way.
Yeah. I like it.
I don't know how exactly they would be able to implement that. It'd have to be somebody that's like above me that makes the decision. But I mean, why not do it? If you can implement it, do it.
Yeah, you might have to write a white pepper before you get out, sir.
Probably.
All right. Fair enough. All right. So that concludes today's interview, sir. I really appreciate you coming on and being my very first guest. I want to apologize to you for calling you lieutenant, as you are Captain Schaffrin now. And
now, to be fair, the ceremony hasn't happened yet. With IPSA's crossover, there was an issue, and like they emailed HRC, they're like, "Oh yeah, he's promoted back to May 1st." So
it doesn't matter.
Get the back pay, which is great. Right?
It doesn't matter. You sent me the freaking email. I mean, you sent me the text message. I saw it, and I still called you lieutenant because I had it written down here.
But also, you're used to saying that for the last how many years? Like I can't hold that against you.
You're right.
That's fair.
But yeah, I do appreciate you coming on, sir. Thank you for your time. I know it took a while to get everything started, but thank you so much. You put a lot of good knowledge out there for everyone. And actually, for those who want to find you, where can they find you?
Sure. So on TikTok, it's at JShaft13. Instagram is at fitness_and_prosperity. My first and last name, Josh Schaffrin, on Facebook. And then if you were to Google me, you also see like my IMDb and stuff like that on there. So I've got a few credits in the works, hopefully many more to come. So we'll see.
Fair enough. All right, sir. I appreciate you for your time. Take care, and I'll see you on the other side.
My pleasure.
Roger, sir.